welcome to Trending How We Meet.
Nestled in the beating heart of Angwan Nasara, Ruga Mararaba is a vibrant community, boldly facing challenges and navigating through adversity with unwavering resilience. During the rainy season, the river poses a threat as it can flood homes in Angwan Nasara, Ruga Mararaba. Chief Audu Tafa, the traditional ruler of Sabongeri, sheds light on the harsh living conditions and the community's ongoing struggle with essential amenities. Reliable water sources is not available to them as they depend on vendors, locally known as Merua, for water.
Little history I know about this river. We've been here now since 2012. Then before I came down to 2012, it was a church somewhere there that, creates passage a little bit. Then later they struggled to make sure that this bridge is being constructed. But actually during the rainy season, it's a lot of problem. Let me just put it in a simple, it's a lot of problem because once the rain start falling, if a heavy rain it comes up, nobody will be able to cross the river or cross the river. Nobody. You know where is the road. You know where is the road. You just everywhere will be blocked up until after some few hours. Then when the rain stops, then people start. It's the big problem that we are facing here. The only source of water we have here is all these people that have boreholes. This Merua, this outside people that sell Merua. So likewise myself. That's where we are living. Before this fuel subsidy problem, the truck of water then, which is 14, they sell it going to be 250, 300. Man, now it's 500. It's now 600 naira.
Blessing Omachi, a resident for over 7 years, highlights the challenging living conditions, emphasizing the lack of access to quality education, road, security, and healthcare. Despite these hardships, the community faces steep house rent rates, with a single room reaching close to 80,000 naira.
I've been in this place for over 7 to 8 years now. The living condition is not friendly. The way there is no water, it's just few borehole. Buy water in this place. Like truck is 600. Now that is before 600. Now it's up to 800 per truck. And sometimes if there is no light, that is how we'll carry rubber up and down and be looking for water. The government hospital here is not functioning well. Government school is nothing to write home about. It's not good at all. The government school is just all this. The way the children go to school without no slippers, no sandals. So we cannot even put our children in the government school because it's bad influence. Children going there. The rents are expensive. They are expensive. It's not like single room in this place is up to 80, and there's no water. 80,000 for single room, and you will share toilet. It's 80,000.
While education is one of the basic gain in life, Sir Benson, a dedicated school owner, emphasizes the community's eagerness for education and the critical need for improved infrastructure.
Initially, I was thinking that maybe this part of the world, they don't like going to school. But if you look at my school now, majority of the students, they are from this part of the world. Many of them, they are outside Fulani. So the school is, the people here, they have interest in education very, very well.
Damuwanmu, kin ga dai damuwanmu na farko, kin ga gada ga ta can. To ita ce muna da damuwa akan ƙwarai da gaske. Mu ne ke ɗan haɗa kuɗi muna ɗan mutanen unguwa mu ne ke haɗa kuɗi muna ɗan yin ta. Yanzu kina ganin wannan hanya tun daga Maraba, tun daga Maraba har ta kai kan ba kwalta. Ba mu da ruwa, ba makarantar gwamnati.
In the midst of these challenges, Angwan Nasara sent out a resounding plea for better living conditions, improved education, and infrastructure. The question lingers: will the authorities answer this call? Time holds the key as this community presses on in the hope of a brighter tomorrow.
It's good news. Are you a stakeholder in the built environment, or you are looking for an authentic, credible source for housing and construction news in Africa? You now have an opportunity. Africa International Housing Show has now created a unique opportunity for you by establishing a full-fledged housing television, the first of its kind in Africa. You can now access information on home ownership, rental, building materials, finance, real estate and insurance, among others, all on Housing TV Africa, channel 149 on StarTimes.
It is undeniable that Abuja is a beautiful city, but one thing that takes away the beauty is the city's slums and rural areas that have been neglected. These areas have many stakes and hurdles to contend with on a daily basis. Kabosa, a cosmopolitan city inhabited by people with diverse ethnic backgrounds, is a community situated in the Federal Capital Territory with little or no basic amenities. The poor sanitary conditions that families, especially children, have to live in is not palatable and pose a threat to the well-being of the residents. The lack of basic amenities in this area is alarming, as the entrance road to Kabusa is nothing to write home about. One can only imagine how these roads will be during the raining season. The source of water in this community is a major challenge for residents living in Kabusa. Housing TV Africa further investigated by speaking with Mr. Julius, a resident in the community, who lamented about the source of water as well as easy access to health care.
This Kabusa, we just did a manager because of the thing. Now, if you want fresh water now, you will go far place before you go look for the water when you go fresh. Hospital man no dey close here. If person not well, they could carry and go inside town before. So as we just did here, plenty things one not every day here when some things when we they look for plenty things. Now see environment man no look so good.
One would expect that being a slum area, accommodation will be affordable. In the case of Kabusa, house rents are expensive and these houses are not modern, nor are they habitable to live in, with a self-contained going for 80,000 naira. According to Mrs. Felix, these houses don't have a kitchen or toilet.
I'm paying 45. It's one room, nothing inside. The toilet, there about 5 people share it. Kitchen is outside and using this local stone to cook.
Mr. Joseph lamented about the insecurities of the community as one of the major challenges of the residents living in Kabusa.
We are facing much problem here. See food problem, see insecurity every day. In the night you can't sleep. Even though we say we have security around us, but you see people disturbing us in the night. So, but I pray the government should listen to us and come and do something and give us a better living condition.
For business owners like Joy, the lack of electricity in the community is a major challenge.
We don't used to have light every day. Now we don't have light. Yesterday, every light is low current. So I used to pick my fridge because I use the fridge. Yes, that's what we are suffering for here.
The residents of the Kabusa community call on the federal government to make Kabusa a better and enjoyable place to live in. Maimuna Bagudu reporting for Housing Development.
Housing TV Africa, your first in housing development broadcasting.
We don't have road, and you see at times if it is raining, you will see a lot of people will go by the roadside. They'll be thrown dirt on the main road. We also doesn't have toilet. You will see a toilet, you will still have to 30 tenants, they are using one. You can't leave your door open, go out and buy something. Before you will know, Babambola will enter. By the time you will take them to police station, 1 hour is too much, the police people will release them. In fact, we don't know what is happening.
This is the situation with many citizens in not just Nigeria. Are we ready for this conversation? What is the plight of an average Nigerian citizen in regards to housing? Housing is a fundamental human right, and these issues must be addressed.
In the 21st century, when other countries are carrying out giant strides and giant development, it's so unfortunate that in Nigeria we still deal with common diseases such as malaria.
The major contributing factors to malaria in Nigeria is as a result of poorly designed irrigation water systems, inadequate housing, poor waste disposal and water storage. Malaria is one of the most severe global public health problems worldwide, particularly in Africa, where Nigeria has the greatest number of malaria cases. Nigeria suffers the world's greatest malaria burden with approximately 51 million cases and 207 deaths reported annually. Malaria accounts for 60% of outpatient visits to hospital and leads to approximately 11% maternal mortality and 30% child mortality, especially among children less than 5 years. The major question now is who is to blame for all of this, the people or the government?
We clean the gutter. We clean the gutter now tomorrow. The thing is full inside. Mosquito no go allow us rest. And one small picking again, they give for ground. We be say mosquito no they won't allow us rest. So I don't know whether what we will tell government. They will go and arrange the gutter for us or help us with small things for this gutter. Where we go relax where. This is our environment.
It affects our children when they're sick. Mosquito they bite them. So then they're sick. My own man just treat her man, she never get herself. All because of the environment. We need government, not to help us. The sweeper now, the flush gutter every day, they try, medicine reduce. But it's still there.
These things are definitely not encouraging. And this disease called malaria can definitely be eradicated. It's no big deal. Our country can do it. Nigerians as a people, we should also help government on our own part by trying to make sure we sanitize our environment and keep it clean. But then, bulk of the blame must rest at the table of government. I remain yours sincerely, Solomon Rango. This is Project New Nigeria. A new Nigeria is possible. this is one out of the so many growing number of slum areas in the FCT. The conditions of living around this environment is despicable, terrible, dehumanizing, and against every principle of human justice, to say the least. This is no less as a result of high cost of living within the city center, and low-income earners have no choice than to come to environments like this and subject themselves to low standards of living. According to the United Nations Human Settlement Program in Nigeria, about 80 million Nigerians live in slums. The growth of slums around the Federal Capital Territory has largely been as a result of inadequate and non-affordable housing for all classes of the citizenry. The challenge of securing land tenure for the teeming populace, the high cost of building materials, inaccessible mortgage mechanisms for the poor, as well as the high rents of urban accommodation has been responsible for many of the city's suburban slums. The overcrowded nature of the slums and substandard houses also exposes people living there to infectious diseases such as tuberculosis, hepatitis, fever, pneumonia, cholera, and malaria. Poor sanitation and lack of safe food and water contribute to high prevalence of diarrhea within slums. In order to curb the rising number of slums in the Federal Capital Territory, government must come up with sound policies and take quick measures in providing affordable housing for the citizenry. Fortunately, we live in a country where we are good at actually doing nothing. But we will not stop talking until it gets to the relevant authority and they do something about improving the standard of living of every Nigerian. I am Solomon Rango. I now return you back to Flora for the rest of the program.
The 17th edition of the Africa International Housing Show, AIHS, flagged off on Monday, 24th of July 2023. The event was officially declared open by the chairman, AIHS Board, Surveyor Suleiman Darama, and former Minister of Environment, who noted that the 17th edition will address issues facing the housing sector and prefer practical solutions to its challenges.
Housing challenges all over the world has continued to be an issue of discourse amidst population explosion, especially in urban centers, rising global crisis, conflicts emanating from wars, terrorism, national disasters. In the face of this crisis, shelter will continue to be ranked universally as one of the basic needs of mankind after food, and it will remain a strategic asset to man, irrespective of socio-economic status, color, or creed. It is time, therefore, to work together as stakeholders to holistically tackle our housing problems. Housing sector have potentials that can be tapped for driving our economic recovery if only we choose to get our acts together and tackle housing deficits and affordability challenges.
Today we gather here to address a critical and pressing issue that lies at the heart of our nation's progress and development. The challenge of housing in Nigeria. The theme for our discussion is beyond rhetorics, making housing work in Nigeria. The housing situation in Nigeria demands urgent attention. Rapid population growth, urbanization, inadequate urban planning, bureaucratic retapism, and insufficient funding have all contributed to the housing crisis that many Nigerians endure daily.
So this year's theme, Beyond Rhetorics to Homes, Making Homes Happen, shows indeed that it is time to move away from rooms like this one to realities, to action. We need to really put our hands together to execute and deliver affordable housing for our populations, who are in dire need for those homes.
Your choice of Abuja for this 17th edition further adds credence to our effort in making our city a conference tourism of choice on the African continent. And the theme for this convergence, which is Beyond Rhetoric to Homes, Making Housing Happen, is not only apt, but has at the most appropriate time as the need for mass housing for Nigerians becomes ever more pressing, particularly during the 4-yearly democracy cycle.
In his address, the Director General, African Development Bank, Lamin Barrow, says the need to bridge the housing gap in Nigeria has accelerated actions towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goal 11 targeted across the continent through AIHS.
For this year's conference, beyond rhetoric to homes, making housing happen could not have been more apt, considering the urgency of bridging Nigeria's housing deficit and accelerate actions towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goal 11 targets across the continent.
AIHS is the largest housing and construction show in Africa and has over the years impacted real estate businesses across Nigeria, Africa, and the world at large. Call it the one-stop shop where the latest trends and building technology are showcased. AIHS is a place where housing problems meet solutions. The event was graced with the presence of Oba Abdulwasiu Omobolao Lawal, Abishogun II, and the 15th Oniru of Iruland, who encouraged stakeholders to be bold and take audacious steps to deliver affordable housing units in Nigeria.
As part of the palliative, government is proposing to cushion effects of subsidy removal and others, an audacious and ambitious housing initiative to be launched by government, driven by reputable private sector players. Under the initiative of 1 million homes a year, the government, working with, say, 100 developers on pilot phase, will issue a bank guarantee to each for 10,000 homes, each in batches of face value of 1,000 units per time.
His Royal Highness Alhaji Dr. Yahya Abubakar Isu Nupe and the chairman, Niger State Council of Traditional Rulers, wasn't left out. Group photographs with sponsors, partners and dignitaries, cutting of ribbon and tour of exhibition booths, with exhibitors showcasing their different brands, products and services, made highlights of the opening ceremony of the 17th Africa International Housing Show.
But the question is, we have a new national housing strategy, which was launched on the last day in office. Some of us wondered why it took 8 years before the last administration did so many things, including launching a national housing strategy on the last day of the administration. But that's not the issue today. So we have a new national housing strategy. And as you know that in this country, we are never bereft of policies, we're never bereft of plans, we're never bereft of strategic documents. We've always had issues with execution and executional excellence. That's been our major issue. Now, if you've gone through this new national strategy, part of what I find very interesting and very comforting is that some of the key problems of the industry form the bedrock of the strategy. So you see the strategy talking about collaboration, talking about inclusiveness, talking about integrating the various elements of the housing ecosystem in order to ensure that we're able to deliver on housing this time around. So our duty this afternoon during this session is to take some peep into the strategy, into the housing strategy, look at some perspectives, and generally try to see what can we do differently to ensure that we get different results. Like they say, there is a madman who does the same thing over and over again. and expect a different result. And this afternoon, I can see some of my panelists and speakers on ground. Okay, please join me to invite to the podium Mr. Mustafa Njie, founder, CEO, TAF Africa Group. TAF is doing very, very interesting stuff. You know, I saw his video on Sierra Leone, and I was wondering why he didn't take me along on that particular trip. You know, Mustafa, you're welcome. Anywhere, please. Also join me to welcome Mr. Odunaya Ojo, the MD CEO of USN Property Development Company PLC, UPDC, Odunaya Ojo.
Now I stand here wearing many hats. As you know, maybe from the way I talk, I am Gambian, but these days I can be also classified as Nigerian because I've spent over a decade here. I've roamed across the country, and I think we've successfully delivered a project in Port Harcourt. And Port Harcourt is one of the probably most difficult areas to work, especially at the time that we went in there. So the question, I'm not privy to the national new strategy. So, but let me just go back to the theme where it says, you know, beyond rhetorics to homes and making it happen. And what can we do different? So I am going to cite examples because I have had, you know, experience in Nigeria where we've delivered successfully 1,100 homes on a swampy land and sand filled 850,000 cubic meters of sand and sold out. So that's a success story. But also, I do tell people quite a number of times that my failures in life are more than my successes. So I've failed woefully in Nigeria on projects that people don't know about. So now, why is it that we've done things right in Port Harcourt? Let's learn from the best of examples. And first, as mentioned, collaboration with government is key. And I come from the private sector, coming from a country that is only 2 million in population. So how can I come to Nigeria with a population with 200 million and in the Niger Delta and make a difference? Now, the difference, you must give it to the government at the time. What have they done so that we could operate as we did? And I think the lesson to learn there was that there was a one-stop shop. They established a Bureau of Public-Private Partnership. And as a foreign investor, I have never gone to see any government official. So that's a lesson to learn. What we need to do right is to make sure that public-private partnership bureaus are established, and then we cut the bureaucracy. Investors cannot be exposed to all the players in government. So that's a lesson to learn, and that was successfully done in Port Harcourt. Then the other thing is understanding the market. In any business that we do, the first thing we do, we send in consultants. And basic things that we all know, do a SWOT analysis of the ground. What are the strengths of the area that you want to operate? And the strength at the time was more of an opportunity. Nigeria generally, I can say the strength, labor is abundant. Local materials, the same. You'll be surprised that if you go to other countries, basic things like sand is luxury. In my country where I come from, we don't have granite. We don't have chipping stone. We have to import it from Senegal. So you have to drive about 300, 400 miles to ferry a 20-ton truck of black stone. But here in Nigeria, you have everything here. So local materials are available. That is a strength. Now, the weaknesses in Nigeria, I'll just take one major one, and it's the currency. And let me give you a good example. Currency, but let's make it two, currency and also political risk. Because whatever you are doing with any state government or federal government, goes around for a maximum of 8 years. And some of this development take much more than that. By the way, our vision is to build 1 million homes. So if I want to build, let's say, for example, 30,000 or 40,000 homes, it will live beyond the 2 terms of any political party. But we deal with politicians who are the policymakers, and these policymakers, their development term is only 4 years. So that is a major weakness. Then the currency, and I'll give you a good example. And this I said to Mr. Ann yesterday, we had dinner. That do you know that in Nigeria today, it is the only place that your property devalues? Good example, when we started in Port Harcourt, again, we were selling 3-bedroom apartment for 19 million naira. That was in 2013. Now, at the time, it was 160 to the dollar. And I'm a foreign investor, so when I bring my money in and then change into naira, I need to repatriate back after I've sold. So at the time, 119 million was worth $118,000. So people who bought those apartments, what they've done basically, they've taken $118,000 to invest it in a 3-bedroom apartment. Now, 10 years later, where we are now, property has now appreciated in terms of naira. What was selling for 19 million today is selling for 40 million. But what's the exchange rate for the naira? If I want to convert it now into US, I will only have $47,000. So this is a reality. So I will tell you probably what we need to do different then. Because this is a reality. Most of the materials that you use in construction are imported, and you need the dollars. So the other thing is financing solutions. We need to be innovative in how we finance our projects. Banks are not a solution. The worst place to go for real estate development is deal with a commercial bank. You are laughing, Nia. You're one of them, one of the bankers. I always tell bankers when they approach me that banks only give you an umbrella when the sun is shining, never when it's raining. So don't go to them. They are your worst enemy. So again, let me just share my example. One thing that any developer needs to do is to build a brand. When I came into Nigeria, I had built a brand already, and we continue to build a brand. Actually, I'm just starting a 5,000 unit development in Sierra Leone. And we've started receiving monies from people. Use other people's money. And that way, the only way you can do so is by making sure you build a brand. Again, when I talk to people, I tell them all the time, that, but how do they know that you've done this? I mean, I say, but talk to my uncle. We all know our uncle. These days, our uncle. You know my uncle, not so? Uncle Google. If you are a serious developer, if they type your name, they will know who you are. But if you are a fly-by-night, they will also know who you are. So again, build a brand and then work out financial solutions. Then technology must be embraced. We must scale up. We must stop the issue of trying to develop 100, 200 units at a time. And that's what we did again in Port Harcourt. 3 minutes, perfect. So we embraced technology. We brought in steel. So we could build 16 apartments in 3 months, finished. So one needs to look at technology and scale up. The next thing is the policies. I'll leave that to the other guys. Currency risk I've already mentioned. Now solution. My advice for Nigeria, we should embrace carcasses. Let's forget trying to finish a house. It's not affordable. You cannot afford it. And that's the reality. So that's what I want to leave here on the podium. Because let's look at the materials that are available locally that you can pay for naira. For example, somebody was presenting the price of cement. Cement now in Nigeria, because of the naira and because it's produced locally, it's one of the cheapest cement you can find in the sub-region. You have granite here, you have sand, you have wood. So therefore, let's not try to make the impossible possible. It is not possible to deliver affordable houses with imported materials. That is the reality. So way forward is, let us meet them halfway. Put the infrastructure in place, give them access to land, and make sure, let us be reasonable on the amount of land we give them. We are now developing 2-bedroom houses on a plot of 185 square meters. At first, people will say, oh no, it's too small. But there's not enough land for everybody. So we need to look at our design, look at our materials, and final word is, let's go for carcasses. Thank you.
One point that we always make is that housing thrives off the back of very strong macro fundamentals. When the macro fundamentals are sloppy, as we've seen, the result is what we get. And it's really, really difficult. So, but I like also just focus on the key issues, the nuggets, as they are putting them together. Because in the end, we like to pull everything together so that we'll see what we can take away from this. Please join me to welcome the CEO of UPDC.
Thank you very much, Kim, as we fondly call him. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank the organizers of this event for inviting me to speak. And it's a pleasure to be amongst friends and colleagues. So a lot has been said already today. I think we're just building on the theme that we started discussions on. And I'm going to just focus on 5 areas. I have 5 ideas that I would like to share in terms of just going beyond the rhetorics of a new housing policy or housing strategy document. I think we need to stop paying lip service to the issue of housing. We come here every year, we talk about the problems, we all have ideas of how to solve the problems, but we go back and it's business as usual. We're talking during the biblical session that we all need to just stop it and start behaving differently. If we don't do that, if I was a betting person, I would bet that I'll come back again here next year and we'll still be talking about exactly the same thing. So the first thing that needs to change in terms of what needs to change is our attitude to the issue of housing. And that cuts across all of us in this room, cuts across policy makers and policy implementers, so to speak. So what do I mean by not playing lip service? And it's in everything, starting from things like land administration. We all know that the cost of land is prohibitive. We cannot achieve any successful housing agenda if the cost of land administration is still this high. If you buy a plot of land in Lagos with good title, for instance, you have to pay multiples and multiples of percentages of the value of your property in title registration, and so on, and so on, and so on. And then the cost of infrastructure is so high. And by the time you layer all this as a private developer, there's just no way it can be affordable. So let us all forget about what is termed affordable housing, because it's an arithmetic problem. It's not even a mathematical problem. It's very simple to just add up the costs, and it will equal the eventual price that customers have to pay. And the solution is not in praying that government does it for us. I think that's something else that also needs to change. We need to change our mindset in terms of what government can do. And that brings me to my second point, which is what many people have termed the public-private partnerships, the PPP. They really do work if we have the right framework. And we are seeing some states champion that and building new cities and making infrastructure available, making access to land accessible. And from that, you can build on it. And the private sector can do what it does best, which is provide the right kind of capital, provide the right kind of expertise, provide the right kind of technology to deliver the kind of housing that will suit our people. The third point I have here is on having creative funding models. Professor Nubi alluded to something this morning. He said, we all live in homes. How were our homes funded? I can bet you that not more than a small percentage was funded through mortgages. So how do we currently do it? Somebody needs to go back and research into non-traditional methods of financing, and we can craft our own unique solutions. Kim said it. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. We must stop this rhetoric of saying the same thing year in, year out, and then coming back and wondering what happened. How come there was no change? So I believe that we need to look at non-traditional funding mechanisms, and we need to find a way to aggregate the informal sector. Most of the statistics we have out there today that was being reeled out, it mostly covers the formal sector. It covers what the World Bank has told us, what the Economic Investment Unit has told us, and so on and so forth. But there are millions of people out there building in the Southeast, building in the South-South, building in the Southwest that are not captured by these statistics. How can we aggregate the power of the informal sector? People who use their funds, people from different spheres of life, traders, farmers, teachers, who just generally look at alternative ways of financing real estate. Some of them use their savings, some of them use quasi-cooperative type arrangements, some of them use Esusu, some of them staff themselves, and they contribute much more than the 40% that we all use as the benchmark in financing their homes. How can we aggregate this? Can we think about financing slightly differently? That's another question. My fourth point is on having pragmatic building solutions. I would like to align with what Mustafa said around
recording in progress.
Around what type of buildings do we really have? First and foremost, we need to understand that not everybody can own a home. But it will appear that every single conversation is about home ownership. In this life, not every human being can own a home. But you need to have access to a decent home. You need to climb a ladder. Somebody needs to even provide the housing for rentals. And then you climb the ladder to become a homeowner. Why is home ownership such a sacrosanct objective when what you just need is access to housing? So we need to look at income levels. We need to look at what is really pragmatic and what is doable in terms of what our cost structure is right now with our different types of building systems, and find a way to reduce that barrier so that more people can go in from rental to home ownership. So pragmatic building solutions from our tastes. Why do you need a 150 square meter apartment? Why do you need a 200 square meter apartment? Maybe what you can afford is a 60 to 70 square meter apartment, and it will serve your need. It reduces your cost, and it reduces the barrier to entry. Most of us talked about shell or shell and core or non-finished homes. It could be a pathway to owning your home faster. We also have to talk about local building materials. Why do we all have to go for concrete, with the cost so high? Can we use locally produced materials? Can we use adobe bricks? Can we use all these other things that a lot of research is being done in other parts of the world to bring down the barriers to entry? So that's something we may also need to do differently to improve access to housing. And then lastly from me is about capacity building. We in the industry are very familiar with the death of technical skills. You want to have plumbers, you want to have tilers, you want to have mason. You will struggle to get one that is well trained, that can deliver your properties to the quality that you want. We need to start focusing on capacity building at that level, because these are the guys that are going to deliver the kind of homes that we want. Our technical education needs to be improved. We need to stop playing that rhetoric that everybody needs to be a graduate to be fulfilled. Everybody needs to be an engineer, to be fulfilled. People can be artisans and be fulfilled. They all form a part of the value chain for housing delivery and reducing the cost. Thank you very much.
My name is Biola Akiola.
My name is Miriam Lawa from Macro Homes Nigeria Limited.
Hey people, this is Town Planner Bello Oluwayinka.
My name is Akintoye Adeoye, the incoming president of Redan.
Hello everyone, my name is Maiwa Okwedari. Keep watching Housing TV Africa.
Keep watching Housing TV Africa.
Keep watching Housing TV Africa.
Shout out to Housing TV Africa, channel 149.
Keep enjoying Housing TV Africa on channel 149, Star Times.
Keep watching Housing TV. If you want to know much about what is happening in the built environment, housing related, land resource related issues, this is the place to go.
They are the best.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we decided to do differently for this conference this year is to be a lot more granular and very pragmatic, rather than just bring all those presentations with templates and all the stuff that we see every year. So we just consider it very, very prudent for us this year to take a deep dive into the critical issues and bring those who have gone through these routes, who are able to, from their experiences, share the fundamentals that we need to do to drive the sector forward. I'm going to move to Habib now. And it comes from several perspectives, financing from his background at World Bank, IFC, and now at Shelter Afrique. A whole lot of interesting stuff that Shelter Afrique is planning to do. I was privileged to attend the last AGM. We also were together in Washington last month for the IFC Affordable Housing Conference, But I'm going to allow him to tell his tale, So please join me to welcome MD CEO Shelter Afrique.
Thank you very much. Can we have the presentation, please? Yes, I have a presentation this time. So this one, I decided to I had two presentations, but in this particular case, I think it's useful to have the presentation projected because it's about the Nigerian National Housing Strategy. I think it's important that we are fully aligned in terms of what Shelter Afrique is doing across the continent and what the National Housing Strategy in Nigeria is looking to achieve for the next 10 years. It's a blueprint. It's been just, published in 2023 in May, so just 2 months ago, under the last outgoing government. So if we get a chance to project it again. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so, we've been providing comments. We were part of sort of the discussions on this national housing strategy in Nigeria, which, as I said, was issued this past May 2023. So it's really fresh, and it was under the collaboration of several entities and with different objectives of harmonizing all the documents and text and initiatives that have been going on. Because one of the issues we have in many countries is that we have so many initiatives and so many write-ups on policies, on strategies, and we can get lost into that. And I think the other interesting thing that this strategy looks at is really the enabling environment. We spoke about data earlier on, and I think what this strategy is also doing is to recognize that it's so important to address the doing business in the sector to enhance access to housing finance through different mechanisms, in particular capital markets developments. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that I could have shown earlier as well, right? In terms of that data, we know that housing has a large impact on economic cycles, as economic cycle indicators like housing stocks, housing starts, home sales, new home starts. All these are indicators that can help predict the number of jobs that can be created in an economy, the wealth creation, the growth in GDP, can all be driven by these indicators of housing, right, of the housing sector. And we also know that housing addresses many SDGs, like a better health, sustainable cities, education, energy, climate, etc. So these are all elements that are in line with the new national housing strategy also in Nigeria. Next slide, please. And again, that's also part of our own strategy at Shelter Afrique, our new 5-year strategy. So I think it's impossible to develop a strategy if you don't understand the context to see what's going on in current markets, right? We all know the global turbulences that are going on right now in global economies. The World Bank has actually projected that, the global economic growth for 2023 is less than 2%. And for emerging markets, it's actually a bit higher, but still lower than historical numbers. So at 2.3%, that's the expectations. We all know the challenges we have in the markets in terms of high commodity prices, supply chain disruptions, high food insecurity and poverty, inflation, tighter financial conditions, and other policy issues. And in many of our countries, we all know the issues with sovereign debt. There's a huge crisis in sovereign debt. And this is exactly why Shelter Afrique is also stepping in these times of crisis for many of our countries, because it's in situations like this is where Shelter Afrique can play a counter-cyclical role, right? Where basically when countries have difficulties issuing bonds and issuing capital in the local capital markets, we, Shelter Afrique, can actually issue on behalf of our countries and use those proceeds to finance the sector. So we don't need to have countries bearing the cost of financing on their balance sheet, right? So we can carry this. And this is exactly what we've done in Nigeria last year, where we issued 46 billion naira out of a program of 200 billion nairas for the next 3 years, which would help us really generate funding to finance affordable housing in Nigeria. And we're going to do this in many other countries. Next slide, please. So talking about data again, right, linked to the strategy, obviously, these are some of the numbers we know about Nigeria. The high population growth rate, 2.5%, and urbanization rate that's also growing fast. The number of people living in slums, 54%. It's more than half. It's not acceptable. And then the mortgage to GDP ratio, we all spoke about it this morning, 0.5%, while you have countries that are above 57%. So this is really abysmal, and it's the same reality in many of our countries in Africa. So this is exactly why Shelter Afrique was created, to really address these challenges. The interest rates, again, double digits, close to the 20%, short tenors, they're all challenges that we know in these markets. Next slide, please. So this is just next, you can click another one, please. One more click. Yeah, so basically, Shelter Afrique, as you all know, was set up in 1982 in Zambia as a reminder to address exactly the challenges we spoke about. 44 member states are shareholders, and African Development Bank, including also Africa Re, are all shareholders. And we focus solely on affordable housing and urban development. We finance banks, and we finance also developers and the value chain as well. Next slide. So in terms of the way we assess, our impact, we have to look at not only number of houses built, but also the jobs that are created in the value chain, the number of people that actually get access to those homes, and then the climate impact also, things that we are also looking at, right? So these are all data driven, and we need indicators to be built around those to measure success. Next slide. Now, if we contextualize a bit the African and Nigerian housing challenges, right? We all know that we have changing demographics that I spoke about earlier. More than 50% of people actually live in urban areas, and this number is expected to become 70% by 2050. So it shows that there's a huge crisis coming if we don't address urban housing. The large housing deficit also is not there to help, and the low supply of housing also is a big challenge. And then housing finance also have constraints in terms of short tenors. Banks have a very low appetite to finance the sector, and our people have low disposable incomes. And then the regulations on laws also have limitations in terms of land laws, the regulatory environment. And we spoke about it, the lack of effective data to guide investments and policy making in our countries. And finally, land ownership and titling, major challenges as well in terms of land tenure and land registries and records that are not very accurate and not automated as well. So these are all challenges that need to be addressed if we are going to really transform the sector. Next slide, please. And these are all reflected also in the strategy that Nigeria has, and which is in line with Shelter Afrique's strategy as well. And again, our holistic approach is also in line, right, with the Nigerian National Housing Strategy, where we are focusing on 4 main areas, right, 4 main businesses. The first one is financing financial institutions, addressing more the demand side with mortgage finance, housing microfinance, trade finance, and financing the whole value chain through financial institutions. So lending to SMEs and trading companies that are importing construction materials to make them more affordable and accessible in our economies. And then the second pillar of our strategy is what we call Project Finance Group, PFG. Right? The Project Finance Group basically addresses financing the private developers, corporate lines of credit, and last mile infrastructure development, because we all know that if we don't have access to basic infrastructure, people will not buy the homes, right? Because they're not going to be livable. And we have a lot of that, a lot of those kind of situations in many of our countries where we work. Student accommodations, one area that many countries don't look at, but there's a huge crisis there. And as we all know, it affects the quality of education. So we are addressing that in our second pillar. And then the third pillar is about PPPs, right? Public-private partnership. Public-private partnerships are key. I think the speakers earlier all spoke about it. So for us, it's the heart of our strategy, really, to partner with governments and government agencies to really drive the affordable housing space through PPP frameworks, working with state housing corporations, social housing programs. I was talking to the CEO of Family Homes Funds, who's a great friend. We've been in Washington a couple of occasions discussing how we could partner as well, because we think they're doing fantastic work here in Nigeria. Urban regeneration is an area of focus for us as well, because in many of our countries, we have slums everywhere. I mean, we just spoke about it. In Nigeria, about 50% of people live in slums. So it's a huge priority. We have to tackle it, right? It's not just about talking about mortgages or things that we know from the West. It's also about resolving the issues we have on the ground. It's not acceptable that more than 50% of our people live in slums, right? So we have to work on urban regeneration. How do we transform those slums to become livable areas and bring developers that can partner so we can make sure that those homes are livable as well. And then finally, right, the fourth part of our strategy, in line with what the National Housing Strategy in Nigeria is also doing, is about really setting up thematic funds, right? So we'll have different areas. We've identified 7 of them where we will focus on. So the first one is about climate resilience, so green buildings. Second one is gender access to housing for women and women working in the housing value chain, SME owned by women. We want to support the women in the sector to drive the agenda. And then the SMEs and trade finance through financial institutions is another thematic area. It's really about jobs creation, because the more SMEs and trade in the housing sector we support, the more jobs we can create in the economies. And the fourth area of the thematic area is basic infrastructure. So we'll set up a dedicated fund to de-risk housing by creating basically an infrastructure fund for affordable housing. Many countries have been struggling with this, where they build homes and you don't have access to water, electricity, sanitation. So we will be addressing that through that fund. And then we have an Islamic finance fund where we've been partnering with the Islamic Development Bank and other Arab funds, right, to really address that. And frankly, Islamic finance is more about ethical lending, which really helps affordability because rent to own is a specific product that's very similar to Islamic finance sort of lending. Refugee, migrants, and IDPs, internally displaced people, is core to our strategy, because we all know in many of our countries in Africa, we have a huge crisis of migration and refugees, and we need to generate housing for the sector, for those people, but also integrate them in our economies by creating jobs, because those guys can be skilled. You can have good masons or plumbers or carpenters that can really be part of that whole economic regeneration in those areas of refugees and migrants specifically. Really we can see great opportunities as well, because we have all these youngsters that are crossing the Mediterranean almost every day and dying in there to go to Europe. Instead of that, we're looking to really generate a fund that would help create jobs for the youth in the construction sector in our countries so they can stay within their countries. And finally, last but not least, diaspora. The diaspora fund, where we really believe that, a lot of the diaspora, they're all looking for homes in their countries, but unfortunately they don't know how. So we want to set up a mechanism where we can have a platform through Shelter Afrique that has access to all these countries that are members to, drive diaspora funding into those countries for home investments, for housing investments, and generate investment returns or housing for the diaspora. Some numbers, basically, we've seen that every year the diaspora is sending about $95 billion every year on the continent. So where's that money going, right? So we want to harness that source of funding to deploy into the housing sector. Next slide, please. So it's great to have a strategy and the policy and all these things, but if you don't know how to implement and execute on the strategy, there's no use for the strategy. So this is exactly why Shelter Afrique has come up with a model to scale up affordable housing and implement such a strategy as a national housing strategy in Nigeria. So we have come up with this model called Viral, how to make housing viral, right? But viral means something. It means vision, institutions, regulations, actors, and local initiatives. So this is the model that we'll be using to engage the different countries we're working in, including Nigeria, to help define what the vision should be for the country. Is it affordable housing for all? Is it about rental housing? Is it about rent to own? So we will be working with our countries to define that vision. Okay. India has done a fantastic model. I used to live in Bangkok, Thailand, covering Asia Pacific for the International Finance Corporation. And this is exactly the sort of framework that was put in place in such a country. India is a model for developing affordable housing because they have a multi-billion-dollar business in affordable housing. So, this is really addressing the full ecosystem, setting up institutions. We see in Nigeria, you have a lot of institutions. The question is, how are they working together, the synergies, collaboration, and how can we really make sure that all those institutions play their role? And then the regulatory framework, defining what affordability means, and also helping the government come up with, I heard subsidy is not a word to be used, but to come up with a system of blended finance, right, into the industry, because you cannot do social housing, affordable housing without blending finance. Let's be very honest with each other. So Shelter Afrique will be going to raise funding through our fourth pillar, the fund management group, will be raising concessional funding, thematic funding, to help governments drive the social housing and affordable housing agenda. So I think the screen is not very clear. I don't know why, but it's unfortunate. Basically, we will be then working with actors, the full value chain, working with developers, housing finance companies, DFIs, other DFIs, to come up with great partnership models to scale up affordable housing. And finally, local initiatives. Every country has a housing program, right? I mean, you talk about Senegal, they have 100,000 presidential housing programs. Some other countries have 1 million, depending on the countries. So we'll be working in that framework to help develop maybe blended finance programs or staff housing programs, set up thematic funds, PPPs, and
recording in progress,
and sector-based funds as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just an illustration of a model of an employer staff housing fund that will be deploying across our countries. We'll be setting up in the middle Shelter Afrique funds, which will be funded through what we call other government DFIs that we have listed at the bottom. And then we have private sector DFIs as well, listed down there. And obviously Shelter Afrique will be anchoring these funds. And we'll have also the private, other private investors like pension funds, social security funds, employers, staff housing funds will come into this aggregator. So we'll be playing a role of an aggregator where we will be linking employers and their staff to housing opportunities and provide offtake guarantees to the developers on the right-hand side, and also have a PPP framework for those developers to work with governments. So it's really a full ecosystem that we're building here to make sure that we can de-risk the housing program. I'm not going to get into more details here, but we'll be happy to discuss in more details with whoever interested. But we're already discussing with our country partners to really deploy this kind of model, because it really de-risk the whole sector A to Z. Next slide, please. So these are some of the examples of some projects that we've been working on. I'm not going to spend time on them. Next slide. Right, so this is what I was explaining earlier, right? The way we're intervening in our countries today through capital markets. As we know, all our countries have budgetary constraints today where they cannot actually go outright and raise funding for different sectors. They have many, many constraints, many issues, many other priorities. So we're saying at Shelter Afrique, we'll be helping countries actually get funding through our own balance sheet, right? So we'll be issuing bonds in the different countries to finance the sector. So as I said, in Nigeria, we have a 200 billion nairas bond issuance program for the next 3 years. We already issued the first tranche last year, 46 billion naira, that we are actually deploying into the market as we speak, with some developers, financial institutions as well, to support the country and the sector while the government has other challenges and priorities to deal with, right? So this is what we are also doing in other countries. This is our plan to do exactly that. And then just to say that this kind of program was very successful because it was 60% oversubscribed.